No one could break the alien princess's chains. Then the lonely human mechanic tore them like paper. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The vast cargo hold of the intergalactic merchant vessel Talgera reeked of oil, metal, and desperation. Hidden behind stacks of supply crates, Miles Harper wiped the sweat from his brow and continued working on the ship's auxiliary power coupling, the only human among a crew of over 200 aliens. The Talgera was anchored at Nexus Station, a sprawling trade hub where species from across the galaxy congregated to exchange goods, technology, and occasionally, living cargo. Miles had joined the merchant vessel 3 years ago after the Galactic Union had annexed Earth, promising humanity protection and technological advancement. What they'd received instead was subjugation and exploitation. Harper, the primary waste extraction system is malfunctioning again, barked Chief Engineer Krezer, his 4 eyes narrowing with contempt. The Valdari engineer's scaled skin glistened under the harsh cargo bay lights. Fix it immediately. Miles swallowed his frustration. I'm still working on the power coupling that you. Did I ask for excuses? Krezer cut him off. Humans. Always complaining. This is why your species serves instead of leads. Miles bit his tongue, knowing better than to argue. His position on the Talgera was precarious at best. Human mechanics were valued for their intuitive problem-solving abilities and small, dexterous hands that could reach places most alien appendages couldn't, but they were still considered inferior by most species in the Galactic Union. I'll get right on it, Chief, Miles replied, collecting his tools. Krezer snorted. And stay away from the secure cargo in Section D. The captain has special merchandise arriving today that's none of your concern. Miles nodded obediently, but curiosity sparked in his mind. Section D was usually reserved for high-value or dangerous cargo. As soon as Krezer left, Miles finished the power coupling repair in record time and headed toward the waste extraction system, deliberately taking a route that passed Section D. The corridor leading to Section D was unusually guarded. 2 hulking Dravex warriors stood at attention, their crystalline armor reflecting the overhead lights. Miles kept his head down as he passed, pretending to check a datapad. The Dravex were notorious for their strength and loyalty to whoever paid them the most. Whatever was being delivered today must be extremely valuable. Hours later, after fixing 3 separate systems that any decent engineer should have been able to maintain, Miles retreated to his tiny quarters. As the only human aboard, he wasn't required to share space, though his privilege was more isolation than luxury. His room was little more than a converted storage closet near the engine room, the constant hum of machinery his perpetual lullaby. Miles collapsed onto his cot, exhaustion seeping into his bones. On his small shelf sat his only personal possessions, a tattered photo of his parents, who had died during Earth's initial contact with the Galactic Union, a small model of Earth's old International Space Station, and a strange metallic cube he'd found floating in space during an external hull repair 2 months ago. The cube was unlike any material he'd seen before. It seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and occasionally, when he was alone, he swore it vibrated in response to his touch. He'd kept it hidden from the crew, instinctively knowing that anything of potential value would be confiscated immediately. A loud alarm jolted Miles from his thoughts. The ship-wide announcement system crackled to life. All non-essential personnel returned to quarters. Security teams to docking bay 3. Prepare for special cargo transfer. Miles frowned. The Talgera wasn't due to depart Nexus Station for another 12 hours. Whatever was happening involved the mysterious cargo in Section D. Normally, he would have obeyed orders and stayed put, but something about the situation felt wrong. Making a split-second decision, Miles grabbed his tool belt and slipped out of his quarters. The service tunnels that ran throughout the Talgera were cramped and rarely used by the larger alien crew members. For Miles, they were perfect pathways to move undetected. He navigated the narrow passages with practiced ease, making his way towards Section D. As he neared his destination, Voices echoed through the ventilation shaft above Section D's main storage area. Miles carefully positioned himself near a grate where he could observe without being seen. The Varkonian royal family will pay handsomely for her return, Captain Dravos said, his tentacled face twisted in what passed for a smile among the Octavian species. Or they'll pay even more if she's never found. Either way, we profit. A group of armed guards entered the storage area, escorting what appeared to be a prisoner. Miles stifled a gasp. The captive was clearly female, with iridescent lavender skin that seemed to shimmer despite the dim lighting. Her hair, a deeper shade of purple, was cropped short, and her eyes, all four of them, were a brilliant silver that reflected the light like mirrors. Despite the alien features, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her. Most striking, however, were the chains that bound her. They weren't ordinary restraints, but appeared to be made of pure energy, glowing with a pulsating blue light. The links connected heavy manacles on her wrists and ankles, with a collar around her neck that seemed to be causing her visible pain. Princess Lyria of the Varkonian Empire, Captain Dravos announced with mock reverence. Your accommodations await. I trust you'll find them adequate for royalty. The princess lifted her head, her expression defiant despite her chains. My people will never stop searching for me. When my father discovers who has taken me, your father will never know, interrupted the captain. As far as the galaxy is concerned, your transport ship was destroyed by pirates. A tragedy, truly. The Convergence Council will investigate, she countered, her melodious voice strained but unwavering. Captain Dravos laughed, a harsh sound that echoed throughout the storage bay. The council? They're too busy dealing with rebellions on the outer worlds to care about one missing princess. Besides, we have friends in high places. Miles watched as the princess was forced into a containment cell, the energy chains still binding her limbs. Once she was secured, most of the guards and the captain left, leaving only two Dravex warriors standing watch outside the cell. Miles remained hidden, his mind racing. He'd heard rumors about the Varkonian Empire. They were one of the few major powers that had spoken against the Galactic Union's treatment of Earth and other newly discovered worlds. If the captain was planning to use the princess as leverage or, worse, planning to eliminate her, it could destabilize the already fragile peace between the different galactic factions. But what could one human mechanic do against an entire crew of aliens? Miles was no hero. He was just trying to survive in a universe that viewed his species as barely more than intelligent pets. Getting involved would only put his life at risk. As he prepared to retreat, the princess suddenly looked up, her silver eyes seeming to peer directly through the grate at him. There was no way she could see him in the darkness of the ventilation shaft, yet Miles felt an inexplicable connection, as if she were silently pleading for help. Before he could process this sensation, a sharp pain erupted in his pocket. Miles bit back a cry, reaching in to find the strange metallic cube he'd found in space. It was vibrating intensely and had become almost unbearably hot. Somehow, it was reacting to the princess's presence. The cube pulsed once, twice, and then projected a holographic symbol into the air, a swirling pattern that matched the royal crest emblazoned on the princess's torn garments. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. The cube must be Varkonian technology, perhaps even something personally belonging to the royal family. As the hologram faded, Miles made his decision. He couldn't leave the princess to whatever fate the captain had planned for her. Somehow, against all odds, he needed to help her escape. For the next 3 days, Miles observed the security patterns around Section D while continuing his normal duties. The princess was kept isolated, with food delivered once daily by a guard. No one else was permitted near her cell. Captain Dravos visited twice, each time emerging with an expression of frustrated rage. Whatever information he wanted from her, the princess wasn't cooperating. During his surveillance, Miles learned more about the energy chains binding the princess. They were Quantex restraints, specifically designed to hold Varkonians, whose species possessed natural telekinetic abilities. The chains not only restricted physical movement, but also suppressed their psychic powers. According to the guards' conversations, only the command codes from Captain Dravos could deactivate them, and the chains themselves were virtually unbreakable, composed of compressed energy fields reinforced with quantum particles. On the fourth night, Miles made his move. The Talgera was scheduled to rendezvous with an unknown vessel in a remote sector the following day. If he was going to act, it had to be now. Using his access to the ship's systems, Miles triggered a series of minor malfunctions throughout the vessel, nothing dangerous, but annoying enough to draw attention away from Section D. As alarms blared about air recyclers and gravity fluctuations in distant sections, Miles slipped through the service tunnels toward the princess's cell. The two Dravex guards were still at their post, but one received a communication on his transmitter and growled something to his companion. After a moment of hesitation, one guard departed, likely to assist with the ship-wide malfunctions. One guard was still formidable, but better odds than two. Miles reached into his tool belt and removed a small device he'd hastily constructed. It wasn't much, just a modified sonic disruptor used for loosening rusted bolts, but recalibrated to the frequency that might interfere with the Dravex's crystalline armor. He'd never tested it, and it might not work at all, but it was his only chance. Taking a deep breath, Miles dropped from the ventilation shaft, landing directly behind the remaining Dravex guard. Before the warrior could turn, Miles activated the disruptor. The high-frequency sound was barely perceptible to human ears, but the effect on the Dravex was immediate. The guard clutched at his armor, which began to vibrate violently, the crystalline structure resonating painfully with the sonic waves. The Dravex fell to his knees, disoriented. Miles didn't waste the opportunity. He grabbed the guard's stun baton and delivered a powerful shock to the base of the alien's neck, one of the few vulnerable points in their otherwise impenetrable anatomy. The guard collapsed, unconscious but alive. Heart pounding, Miles approached the containment cell. The princess stood at the barrier, her silver eyes wide with surprise. "You're human," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality even through the energy barrier. "Last time I checked," Miles replied, examining the cell's control panel. "I'm going to get you out of here, Your Highness, but we don't have much time. Why would you help me? Your kind has no alliance with the Varkonian Empire." Miles paused, looking up at her. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to be treated as less than you are. No one deserves that, princess or not." Something shifted in her expression, surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. "You cannot free me from these chains. They are Quantex restraints, designed specifically to—" "I know what they are," Miles interrupted, his fingers flying over the control panel. After a tense moment, the energy barrier disappeared. "Getting you out of the cell is the easy part. Those chains are going to be more problematic." The princess stepped forward, the glowing blue chains casting eerie shadows across her lavender features. Up close, Miles could see the toll her captivity had taken. Her iridescent skin was dulled with exhaustion, and faint bruises marked her wrists where the manacles had chafed. "Only Captain Dravos has the command codes," she explained. "Without them, the restraints cannot be removed. Many have tried to break Quantex chains before. The strongest warriors of a dozen worlds have failed." Miles reached into his pocket and withdrew the metallic cube. "What about this? It reacted when I first saw you. I think it's Varkonian." The princess gasped. "The royal cipher. We thought it was lost during the initial attack." She reached for it with her bound hands, but as her fingers neared the cube, the energy chains flared brightly, sending a shock through her body that made her cry out in pain. "The restraints prevent me from touching anything connected to Varkonian technology," she explained, grimacing. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. "Security breach in Section D," announced the automated system. "All personnel report to stations." "They've discovered the guard," Miles said urgently. "We need to move now, chains or no chains." He led the princess through the corridors, avoiding the main passages where crew members were rushing to respond to the alarm. Their best hope was to reach the shuttle bay and escape before the entire ship was locked down. As they rounded a corner, They encountered 3 crew members, a Valdari engineer and 2 Octavian security officers. The aliens' expressions shifted from shock to aggressive recognition. "The human is freeing the prisoner," one shouted, reaching for his weapon. Miles pushed the princess behind him and raised the stolen stun baton, knowing they were hopelessly outmatched. The Valdari engineer fired a paralysis beam that Miles barely dodged. The beam struck a control panel on the wall, sending a shower of sparks across the corridor. In the chaos, Miles noticed something extraordinary. The sparks that landed on the princess's energy chains caused momentary fluctuations in the blue glow, tiny disruptions in the otherwise seamless links. An idea formed in his mind, desperate and probably foolish, but their only chance. Miles aimed the stun baton at the approaching security officers, keeping them at bay while backing toward an access panel on the wall. "When I say run, head for Shuttle Bay 2, he instructed the princess in a low voice. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her silver eyes wide with concern. Miles gave her a grim smile. "Something incredibly stupid." With a quick movement, he slammed the stun baton into the access panel, overloading the power conduit within. Electricity arced wildly throughout the corridor, the raw energy far more potent than the scattered sparks from before. "Run!" Miles shouted, grabbing the princess's arm and pulling her toward the electrical discharge. As they passed through the crackling energy field, Miles directed the princess's chains into the most intense part of the discharge. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The energy chains absorbed the electrical overload, their blue glow intensifying to a blinding white. The princess cried out as the feedback surged through the restraints, but kept moving forward. The pursuing crew members halted, unwilling to follow through the dangerous electrical storm Miles had created. It bought them precious seconds to sprint down the corridor toward the shuttle bay. "The chains!" the princess exclaimed as they ran. "They're destabilizing." Miles glanced back and saw she was right. The links connecting her wrist manacles were flickering, the once solid energy now wavering like a bad transmission. The electrical overload had disrupted the quantum particle alignment, weakening the supposedly unbreakable bonds. They reached the shuttle bay doors just as a ship-wide lockdown began. The massive doors started to close automatically, responding to the security breach. Miles and the princess slid beneath them with barely inches to spare, the doors sealing shut behind them with a resounding thud. The shuttle bay contained 3 small vessels used for short-range transport and emergencies. Miles headed for the smallest one, a 2-person craft that would be fastest to launch. "Can you fly this?" the princess asked as Miles worked to override the launch protocols. "In theory," he replied, not looking up from the control panel. "I've watched the pilots enough times. How hard can it be?" The princess didn't seem reassured by his response, but they had no other options. Beyond the shuttle bay's atmospheric barrier, the vast expanse of space beckoned, freedom, if they could reach it. A pounding on the shuttle bay doors indicated their pursuers had arrived. It wouldn't take them long to override the lockdown and gain entry. "Almost there," Miles muttered, his fingers flying over the shuttle's controls. The engines hummed to life, the small craft rising a few inches off the bay floor. Suddenly, the bay door slid open. Captain Dravos stood at the entrance, flanked by no fewer than 10 armed guards, including 4 Dravex warriors in full battle armor. "Harper," the captain roared, his tentacles writhing with fury. "Return the princess immediately, and I might consider making your death quick." Miles turned to the princess, whose eyes reflected the determination he felt. "Hold on to something, Your Highness. This is going to get rough." He slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle lurched toward the atmospheric barrier, but a tractor beam activated, seizing the small vessel in mid-flight. The craft shuddered violently as 2 opposing forces fought for control, the shuttle's engines pushing forward, the tractor beam pulling them back. Inside the shuttle, systems began to overload. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the craft was stretched to its structural limits. "We're not going to break free," the princess said, her voice remarkably calm given their situation. "The tractor beam is too strong." Miles looked at her chains, still destabilized from the electrical discharge, but not broken. An idea formed. Dangerous, probably fatal, but their only remaining option. Those chains of yours, he said. They absorb energy, right? That's how they suppress your abilities. The princess nodded. They convert external energy into the restraint field. What? Miles pointed to the shuttle's power core. What if we overloaded them completely? Your chains are already unstable. If they absorb enough power at once. Understanding dawned on the princess's face, followed by alarm. That could release all my suppressed abilities at once. The backlash would be unpredictable. More unpredictable than being captured and executed? Miles asked. The princess's 4 silver eyes narrowed with resolve. Do it. Miles quickly rerouted the shuttle's power systems, creating a direct connection between the craft's core and the control panel. As Captain Dravos and his guards began to cut through the shuttle's outer hatch, Miles placed the princess's chained hands on the exposed power coupling. This is probably going to hurt, he warned. Pain is temporary, she replied. Freedom is worth it. Miles activated the connection. Raw energy surged from the shuttle's core directly into the princess's restraints. The chains blazed with light, changing from blue to white to a blinding, impossible purple. The princess's body went rigid, her back arching as the energy coursed through her. The shuttle's systems failed one by one as the power core was drained. The tractor beam's pull strengthened as their engines died, dragging them back toward the Talgera's shuttle bay. Just as the guards breached the outer hatch, the princess's chains reached critical overload. With a sound like reality itself tearing, the energy restraints shattered. The release of power sent a shockwave throughout the shuttle bay, disrupting the tractor beam and throwing the boarding guards backward. Miles shielded his eyes from the brilliant flash. When he looked again, the princess stood transformed. Her lavender skin now emitted a subtle glow, and her silver eyes blazed with unrestrained power. The broken remnants of the Quantex restraints lay at her feet, smoking and useless. Hold on to me, she commanded, her voice resonating with newfound strength. Miles didn't hesitate. He grasped her outstretched hand just as Captain Dravos and his recovering guards rushed toward them. The princess raised her free hand. The air around them seemed to bend and warp. The captain and his guards froze in place, caught in some invisible force. This vessel is no longer your prison, Captain, the princess stated, her voice echoing with power. Nor is it mine. With a gesture, she tore open the shuttle's damaged hull. Miles expected to be sucked into the vacuum of space, but instead, a bubble of energy surrounded them, protecting them from the deadly void. The princess pulled him from the ruined shuttle, and together they floated through the atmospheric barrier into open space. Behind them, the Talgera grew smaller as they accelerated away, propelled by the princess's telekinetic abilities. Miles looked at their joined hands, then at the vast starfield surrounding them. What now, Your Highness? He asked. The princess turned her silver gaze to him, a smile forming on her lips. Now, Miles Harper, we find my people. And then, perhaps, we help yours. As they soared through space inside their protective bubble, Miles felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Whatever came next, he knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same again. The Varkonian princess and the human mechanic had broken free of their chains, both literal and figurative, and the galaxy would soon learn just how formidable such an alliance could be. Miles had no concept of how fast they were traveling through the void. The stars streaked by in luminous ribbons as Princess Lyria propelled them forward with her telekinetic abilities, the protective energy bubble around them shimmering with iridescent light. Despite the princess's newfound power, Miles noticed her strain increasing with each passing hour. You need to rest, he finally said, concerned by the beads of sweat forming on her lavender brow. We must put more distance between us and the Talgera, she insisted, her 4 silver eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. You won't help either of us by burning yourself out, Miles countered. There's a small trading outpost in this sector, Helion Station. We could stop there, regroup, Maybe find transport. The princess hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Very well. Direct me to the coordinates. Helion Station appeared on the horizon like a tarnished silver coin against the black velvet of space. Unlike the Grand Nexus Station, Helion was a modest outpost frequented by independent traders, smugglers, and those wishing to avoid official Galactic Union scrutiny. Its neutrality made it both dangerous and ideal for fugitives like themselves. As they approached, Lyria slowed their momentum and adjusted their trajectory toward one of the smaller docking bays. I cannot maintain our protective field inside the station, she warned, and I must conceal my appearance. Varkonians are not common in this part of space. I've got that covered, Miles said, reaching into his tool belt. He extracted a small device and adjusted its settings. Standard holographic disguiser. All mechanics on Union vessels carry them for repairs in hazardous environments. It won't fool any serious scanners, but it should be enough for casual observation. The princess raised an eyebrow, impressed. You continue to surprise me, human. Miles, he corrected with a small smile. My name is Miles. After docking at the station, a process that involved Miles quickly bypassing the bay's security protocols, the princess activated the holographic disguiser. Her lavender skin and 4 silver eyes vanished behind the projection of a blue-skinned Cerulean with only 2 eyes. Her royal bearing, however, was harder to disguise. Try to slouch a little, Miles suggested as they walked through the station's dingy corridors. You look too regal. Lyria attempted to adjust her posture with limited success. This is deeply uncomfortable. Welcome to life as a commoner, Miles replied with a wry smile. Helion Station's central plaza was a chaotic marketplace where dozens of species bartered, argued, and conducted business of varying legality. Miles led them through the crowd toward a shadowy establishment called the Drifter's Rest, a bar frequented by ship crews looking for work or passengers seeking transport. Inside, the air was thick with smoke from various intoxicating substances. A 6-armed bartender served drinks to a diverse clientele, while a holographic entertainment system displayed racing results from across the galaxy. Miles guided Lyria to a corner booth, positioning himself so he could watch the entrance. We need to find a ship heading toward Varkonian space that's willing to take passengers with no questions asked, he explained in a low voice. That won't be easy. The Varkonian Empire isn't exactly popular with independent traders. Your people's strict regulations on outsider commerce have made enemies. Lyria's disguised face couldn't hide her frown. My father's policies are designed to protect our culture from outside influence, not to isolate us from the galaxy. But there are those who have misinterpreted his intentions. Misinterpreted or not, it makes our job harder, Miles said. We need credits for passage, too. I have a few emergency funds, but not enough for secure transport across multiple sectors. The princess removed a small ring from her finger, one of the few possessions the Talgera's crew hadn't confiscated. This contains a quantum filament of pure Varkonian crystal. It should more than cover our expenses. Miles stared at the unassuming ring. You've been carrying that this whole time? It appears to be decorative to most species, she explained. Its true value is known only to those familiar with Varkonian technology. As they discussed their options, Miles noticed a group of rough-looking aliens entering the bar. Their attention seemed too focused, their movements too coordinated to be casual patrons. One of them, a hulking Krivite with scarred green hide, spoke into a communication device while scanning the room. We've got trouble, Miles whispered. Bounty hunters, probably. The captain must have put a price on our heads. Lyria tensed. I can disable them with my abilities. Not without revealing who you are, Miles warned. This place is crawling with witnesses and surveillance. We need another way out. Miles scanned the bar, looking for any potential escape route. His gaze landed on a service door behind the counter, likely leading to storage areas or perhaps maintenance tunnels. If they could reach it without being spotted. The decision was made for them when one of the bounty hunters pointed in their direction, his multiple eyes widening in recognition despite Lyria's disguise. Either the holographic disguiser was malfunctioning or they had more sophisticated scanning technology than Miles had anticipated. "Time to go," Miles said, grabbing Lyria's hand. "Follow my lead." Instead of heading for the exit or the service door, Miles pulled Lyria directly toward the bar counter. The bounty hunters, momentarily confused by their target's bold movement, hesitated just long enough for Miles to reach the six-armed bartender. "Engineering emergency," Miles said urgently, flashing his Talgera mechanic credentials, which he hadn't had time to discard. "Station security sent us. Plasma leak in the maintenance tunnels. Need access now." The bartender's initial skepticism wavered at the mention of a plasma leak, a serious hazard on any space station. "Through there," he grunted, pointing to the service door. "But if you're lying, every second we waste puts this entire section at risk," Miles interrupted with authoritative impatience. The bartender reluctantly pressed his thumb to the door's security scanner. As it slid open, shouts erupted from across the room. The bounty hunters had realized what was happening and were now pushing through the crowded bar toward them. Miles and Lyria slipped through the door just as the first energy blast scorched the wall where they had been standing seconds before. The service corridor beyond was narrow and poorly lit, branching in multiple directions. "This way," Miles said, pulling Lyria toward a ladder that descended into the station's lower levels. His years working in the cramped maintenance tunnels of the Talgera had given him an instinctive understanding of how such systems were typically designed. They climbed down several levels, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter above them. The maintenance shafts opened into a vast network of corridors that served the station's critical infrastructure: power distribution, life support, waste management. For most, it would be a confusing labyrinth, but for Miles, it was familiar territory. "The docking rings should be accessible through here," he said, pointing to a junction ahead. "If we can reach a different bay than the one we arrived in, we might be able to find a ship leaving soon." "You navigate these tunnels as if you've spent your life in them," Lyria observed as they moved swiftly through the narrow passages. Miles shrugged. "In a way, I have. When you're the only human on an alien vessel, you learn to use the spaces no one else wants to go. Maintenance tunnels became my sanctuary." They emerged in a service area overlooking Docking Bay 7, where a sleek vessel with worn but well-maintained hull plating was being loaded with cargo. The ship's design was unfamiliar to Miles, not Union standard, nor belonging to any major trading fleet he recognized. "That might be our best option," he whispered, nodding toward the ship. "Independent trader by the looks of it, if we can offer the captain enough compensation." A sudden commotion from the bay entrance cut his planning short. The bounty hunters had somehow tracked them to this location. Miles and Lyria pressed themselves against the wall, watching as the hunters approached the ship's crew, displaying holographic images that clearly showed their targets. "They're blocking our way out," Lyria whispered. "And they're alerting every ship in the docking ring." Miles's mind raced. They needed a distraction, something big enough to clear their path to the ship, but not so destructive as to endanger the station. His gaze fell on a control panel regulating the bay's atmospheric pressure. "I have an idea," he said, moving toward the panel. "But it's going to get chaotic. When I give the signal, run straight for that ship's boarding ramp. Don't stop for anything." "What are you planning?" Lyria asked, her disguised face creased with concern. Miles gave her a reassuring smile as he began bypassing the panel's security protocols. "Just a little atmospheric disruption. Nothing dangerous, but very disorienting." With a few precise adjustments, Miles rerouted the bay's atmospheric control system. Instead of maintaining stable pressure, he programmed a series of rapid but controlled fluctuations, not enough to cause decompression, but sufficient to create powerful air currents within the bay. "Ready?" he asked, his finger hovering over the activation switch. Lyria nodded, bracing herself. Miles triggered the system and shouted, "Now!" Instantly, the docking bay was thrown into chaos. Powerful air currents whipped through the space, sending loose cargo containers sliding across the floor and forcing everyone to grab onto fixed structures for stability. The bounty hunters, caught in the open, were knocked off their feet by the sudden gale-force winds. Miles and Lyria sprinted toward the ship, fighting against the artificial tempest Miles had created. They reached the boarding ramp just as the ship's captain, a tall, slender alien with metallic scales and elongated limbs, emerged to investigate the disturbance. "We need passage," Miles shouted over the howling winds. "Wherever you're headed." The captain's multifaceted eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Bay malfunction or sabotage?" he asked, his voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "Does it matter?" Miles countered. "We can pay. Generously." He nudged Lyria, who produced her crystal ring. The captain's eyes widened at the sight of the Varkonian crystal. After a moment's hesitation, he beckoned them aboard. Inside. Now. They didn't need to be told twice. As soon as they were aboard, the captain sealed the ship's hatch and shouted orders to his crew. The vessel's engines roared to life, preparing for emergency departure despite the bay's atmospheric disturbance. Miles and Lyria were ushered into a small cargo hold as the ship detached from its docking clamps. Through a porthole, Miles watched as the bounty hunters regained their footing, their expressions furious as they realized their quarry was escaping. The ship lurched as it accelerated away from Helion Station, its navigation systems automatically plotting a course to clear the outpost's immediate space. "That was impressive improvisation," Lyria said once they were safely underway, her holographic disguise flickering slightly from the strain of prolonged use. "Just basic engineering principles applied creatively," Miles replied with a shrug, though he couldn't suppress a small smile at her praise. Their moment of relief was interrupted when the cargo hold door slid open. The ship's captain entered, flanked by two crew members whose hands rested on holstered weapons. "Now," the captain said, his metallic scales gleaming under the hold's lights, "perhaps you can explain why bounty hunters are so interested in a human mechanic and his." He paused, eyeing Lyria's flickering disguise. "Companion." Miles exchanged a glance with Lyria, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "It's a long story," Miles began, "but the short version is we're trying to reach Varkonian space. The princess here needs to return home." The captain's expression shifted from suspicion to shock as Lyria deactivated her holographic disguise, revealing her true Varkonian appearance. "I am Princess Lyria of the Royal House of Varkon," she stated, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of her lineage. "I was abducted from my diplomatic vessel and held captive until this human freed me. We seek safe passage to my homeworld." The captain bowed deeply, a gesture that surprised Miles. "Your Highness, I am Captain Zarin of the independent vessel Starstrider. It is an unexpected honor." "You recognize Varkonian royalty?" Miles asked, surprised. Captain Zarin straightened. "I was born on Alara, a protectorate world of the Varkonian Empire. Though I left to seek my fortune among the stars, I have not forgotten my heritage or my respect for the royal family." He turned to Lyria. "Your father's policies may be strict, but they have kept our world safe while others have fallen to Union exploitation." A weight seemed to lift from Lyria's shoulders. "Then you understand the urgency of our situation." "Indeed," Zarin replied. "Though I must warn you, we are not currently bound for Varkonian space. Our destination is the mining colony of Beresh, at least 2 weeks' journey from the Empire's borders." "Can you alter course?" Lyria asked. The captain hesitated. It would mean breaking contracts and potentially losing valuable clients. However, his gaze fell on the crystal ring still in Lyria's hand. With proper compensation, arrangements could be made. Before they could negotiate further, the ship's communications system blared to life. "Captain to the bridge immediately. We have multiple pursuit vessels on long-range scanners. Union designations." Zarin's expression hardened. "It seems your former captors are not giving up easily." He gestured for them to follow him to the bridge. The Starstrider's bridge was compact but efficiently designed, with a panoramic view screen that currently displayed the starfield behind them. Several small vessels were visible in pursuit, gaining rapidly. "Union interceptors," one of the crew members reported. "Faster than us, but less heavily armed." "They're not trying to destroy us," Miles observed. "They want the princess back intact." Captain Zarin settled into the command chair. Standard evasive pattern. Prepare the shock drive for emergency jump. Shock drive isn't fully charged, Captain, the pilot responded. We need at least 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes, Zarin said grimly. Those interceptors will be in weapons range in 7. Miles studied the tactical display, his mind racing. What if we could disable them without destroying them? Make it impossible for them to follow. Our weapons aren't precise enough for targeted disabling shots at this range, Zarin replied. You don't need weapons, Lyria interjected, stepping forward. I can disable them, but I need to be outside the ship's hull. Every head on the bridge turned to stare at her. That's suicide, Miles protested. Even with your telekinetic abilities, the vacuum, the radiation. I can protect myself, Lyria assured him. But I need direct line of sight to affect their vessels. Captain Zarin considered the princess's offer, then nodded reluctantly. The cargo airlock has an external platform used for hull repairs. It would give you the vantage point you need. Miles immediately stepped forward. I'm going with her. Miles, this isn't, Lyria began. Non-negotiable, he interrupted. You need someone to operate the airlock, and I'm not letting you face this alone. The determination in his voice silenced any further protests. Minutes later, they were in the cargo airlock, Miles wearing an environmental suit, while Lyria created a telekinetic field around herself that would protect her from the vacuum. This is insane, Miles muttered as he checked the airlock controls. You know that, right? Lyria smiled, the gesture somehow both regal and mischievous. Coming from the human who created an artificial atmospheric storm to escape bounty hunters, I'll take that as a compliment. The external airlock door slid open, revealing the vast emptiness of space. The pursuing Union interceptors were now visible to the naked eye, closing the distance rapidly. Lyria stepped onto the external platform, the telekinetic field around her body shimmering with energy. Miles followed, tethered to the ship by a safety line. I'll need to concentrate, Lyria shouted over the communication system built into Miles's suit. Keep watch and tell me when they're within range. Miles nodded, his eyes fixed on the approaching vessels. The interceptors were sleek and predatory, designed for speed rather than sustained combat. As they drew closer, he could make out their weapons systems powering up, not to destroy, but to disable the Starstrider's engines. Now, Miles called as the lead interceptor came within what he judged to be Lyria's effective range. The princess raised her hands, her 4 silver eyes blazing with concentrated power. The telekinetic field around her body expanded, reaching out toward the approaching vessels like invisible tendrils of force. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the lead interceptor suddenly veered off course, spinning erratically as if caught in a powerful crosswind. Miles watched in awe as Lyria systematically targeted each pursuing vessel, her telekinetic abilities disrupting their navigation systems, bending critical components, and in some cases, completely severing their power distribution networks. The Union ships, one by one, fell back, their pursuit abandoned as they struggled to maintain basic life support functions. The display of power was extraordinary, but Miles could see the toll it was taking on Lyria. Her lavender skin had paled to an almost ghostly hue, and her body trembled with exertion. Just as the last interceptor was disabled, her telekinetic field began to flicker dangerously. Lyria, Miles shouted, lunging forward as her protective bubble collapsed. He caught her just as the vacuum of space began to affect her unprotected body. With desperate strength, Miles pulled her back into the airlock, slammed his fist on the emergency close button, and held her tightly as the chamber repressurized. As atmosphere returned to the airlock, Lyria gasped for breath, her silver eyes fluttering open. Did we succeed? She asked weakly. Miles checked the external camera feed. The Union interceptors were now distant points of light, adrift and powerless. Every single one, he confirmed, his voice filled with wonder. You did it. Back on the bridge, Captain Zarin couldn't conceal his amazement. I've heard stories of Varkonian telekinetic abilities, but never witnessed anything of this magnitude. It is not without cost, Lyria admitted, still leaning heavily on Miles for support. I will need time to recover. You'll have it, Zarin assured her. The shock drive is charged. We can jump now and be beyond their sensor range before they repair their vessels. The captain gave the order, and the Starstrider's engines hummed with increasing intensity. The view screen showed space itself seeming to fold around them as the shock drive engaged, propelling them vast distances in an instant. When the ship returned to normal space, they were in an unfamiliar sector, far from their pursuers. We're safe for now, Zarin announced. I've decided to alter our course. We'll make for Varkonian space directly. My contracts can wait. Returning the princess to her people takes priority. Over the next 2 weeks, as the Starstrider traveled toward the Varkonian Empire, Miles and Lyria spent hours together, sharing stories of their respective worlds and cultures. Miles described Earth before the Union annexation, its diverse ecosystems, varied cultures, and humanity's relentless spirit of exploration. Lyria spoke of Varkon, with its crystal cities and ancient traditions of psychic development. My father always believed humans had untapped potential, she told Miles one evening as they sat in the ship's small observation deck, watching distant stars. He argued against Earth's annexation in the Convergence Council, saying that humanity should be allowed to develop naturally, without interference. Fat lot of good that did us, Miles replied, though without bitterness. The Union claimed they were protecting us from more aggressive species, but all they wanted was our resources and labor. Lyria's expression grew thoughtful. The balance of power is shifting, Miles. The Union's control is not as absolute as they pretend. There are many worlds, Varkon included, that have begun to question their methods and motives. You think things could change? Miles asked, a cautious hope in his voice. I know they can, Lyria said with conviction. Especially now that I have witnessed firsthand what a single determined human is capable of. As they approached Varkonian space, Captain Zarin received a transmission from the Empire's border patrol. Word of the princess's rescue had somehow preceded them, and a royal escort was dispatched to guide them safely to Varkon itself. The first sight of the Varkonian homeworld took Miles's breath away. Unlike the industrial worlds of the Union or the chaotic frontier outposts, Varkon was a jewel of a planet, its continents covered with cities that gleamed like facets of a crystal under its golden sun. Massive structures of impossible geometry rose from the landscape, defying conventional engineering principles, sustained, Miles realized, by the telekinetic abilities of its inhabitants. The Starstrider was directed to land at the Royal Spaceport, where an honor guard awaited. As the boarding ramp descended, Lyria turned to Miles, her expression suddenly uncertain. What will you do now, she asked. You cannot return to Union space. They will hunt you as a traitor. Miles hadn't thought that far ahead. In freeing Lyria, he had cut all ties with his former life. Not that there had been much to leave behind. I guess I'll figure something out, he said with forced casualness. Maybe Captain Zarin could use a good mechanic. Lyria shook her head. I have a better proposal. Stay here, on Varkon. Not as a refugee, but as an official representative of humanity. Me? A representative? Miles laughed. I'm just a mechanic, Lyria. You are the human who freed a Varkonian princess when no one else could, she countered. The human who showed initiative, courage, and ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. Who better to represent your species? Before Miles could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a tall, imposing Varkonian male whose regal bearing and striking resemblance to Lyria left no doubt as to his identity. Father, Lyria said, bowing deeply. Emperor Thalric of Varkon studied his daughter with all 4 of his silver eyes, which shimmered with barely contained emotion. When your transport was attacked, I feared the worst, he said, his deep voice resonating with relief. How did you escape? Our intelligence suggested you were being held on a Union vessel. I was, Lyria confirmed. Until this human freed me. She gestured to Miles, who suddenly felt very small under the Emperor's penetrating gaze. A human. The Emperor's surprise was evident. You broke through Quantek's restraints? Miles shifted uncomfortably. Well, technically, I just found a way to overload them. Her Highness did the actual breaking. Emperor Thalric studied Miles with newfound interest. Nevertheless, you risked your life for my daughter when you had no obligation to do so. The Varkonian Empire owes you a debt, human. Miles, Lyria corrected gently. His name is Miles Harper. Miles Harper, the Emperor repeated thoughtfully. Come, both of you. There is much to discuss. In the days that followed, Miles was treated as an honored guest in the Imperial Palace. He was given quarters in the royal wing, provided with Varkonian attire, and invited to council meetings where the Emperor and his advisors discussed the implications of Lyria's abduction and rescue. It became clear that the incident was part of a larger pattern of Union aggression against non-member worlds. Captain Dravos, it seemed, had been acting on orders from high-ranking Union officials who sought to pressure the Varkonian Empire into more favorable trade agreements. They believed holding Lyria would force our hand, Emperor Thalric explained during one such meeting. Instead, they have given us the justification we needed to form a coalition of independent worlds against Union expansion. Miles listened, fascinated by the complex interplay of galactic politics. He had never imagined that his impulsive decision to free a captive princess would have such far-reaching consequences. On the evening of his 7th day on Varkon, Miles was summoned to the Emperor's private study. Lyria was already there, wearing formal royal attire that accentuated her regal bearing. Miles Harper, the Emperor began without preamble. I have been observing you since your arrival. Your adaptability, your practical intelligence, and your inherent understanding of technology are remarkable traits. Thank you, Your Majesty, Miles replied, unsure where this was leading. My daughter has suggested that you serve as an official representative of humanity within our court. I am inclined to agree, but with a modification to her proposal. The Emperor activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Several sectors were highlighted in pulsing purple light. These are worlds where humans have been relocated following Earth's annexation, Thalric explained. Scattered, isolated, and largely without unified leadership. They are ripe for exploitation by the Union, or for liberation by a coalition of independent worlds. Miles stared at the map, each glowing point representing thousands, perhaps millions, of his scattered people. What are you suggesting? The formation of a human autonomy council, the Emperor replied. Not merely representatives within our court, but a legitimate governing body for human interests throughout the galaxy, with Varkonian support and protection. The implication was staggering. You want to help humans regain their independence, Miles said slowly. We want to restore balance to the galactic community, Lyria interjected. And we believe humanity could be a powerful ally in that endeavor. Starting with you, the Emperor added. Your actions in freeing my daughter have proven that humans possess qualities the Union has deliberately undervalued. Your species' adaptability, creativity, and determination are precisely what our coalition needs. Miles looked from the Emperor to Lyria, overwhelmed by the scale of what they were proposing. I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I wouldn't know the first thing about governing or representing anyone. Yet you knew exactly how to free a princess from supposedly unbreakable chains, Lyria countered with a smile. Because you saw what others missed, not a technological solution, but a creative application of existing principles. That's different, Miles protested. Is it? Emperor Thalric asked. Leadership is often about seeing possibilities where others see only obstacles. You have demonstrated that ability under the most extreme circumstances. Miles fell silent, considering. His life as a ship's mechanic had been one of quiet survival, keeping his head down and accepting his place in the Union's rigid hierarchy. The idea of stepping into a role that could shape the future of his entire species was terrifying. And yet, wasn't this exactly what he had secretly dreamed of? A chance to make a difference, to help his people reclaim their dignity and independence? I'll need help, he said finally. A lot of it. The Emperor nodded. You will have the full resources of the Varkonian Empire at your disposal. And, he added with a meaningful glance at his daughter, a royal advisor who has specifically requested the assignment. Lyria's silver eyes met Miles's, and he saw in them the same determination and hope that had first drawn him to her cause on the Talgera. "When do we start?" Miles asked. The answer came not from the Emperor or Lyria, but from an unexpected source. The metallic cube that Miles had carried from the Talgera, the royal cipher that had reacted to Lyria's presence, suddenly floated from his pocket, hovering between them. It unfolded like a flower blooming, revealing an intricate crystalline structure that projected a holographic message throughout the room. Ancient Varkonian symbols swirled in the air, gradually resolving into words that Miles somehow understood, despite never having learned the language. "When chains are broken, new bonds are formed," the message read. "The path of unity begins with a single act of courage." The Emperor stared at the projection in astonishment. "The ancestral oracle," he whispered. "It has not activated in 7 generations." "What does it mean?" Miles asked, watching as the symbols continued to shift and evolve around them. "It means," Lyria said, her voice filled with wonder, "that what we are undertaking has been foreseen. The oracle only activates when a pivotal moment in Varkonian history is at hand." The holographic display expanded, showing new imagery, humans and Varkonians working side by side, followed by other species joining them. A coalition forming, growing, eventually encompassing much of the galaxy. And at its foundation, 2 figures stood together, a Varkonian princess and a human mechanic. As the vision faded, the royal cipher folded back into its cubic form and gently settled into Miles's outstretched hand. "Well," Miles said, looking from the cube to Lyria to the Emperor, "I guess that settles it." In the months that followed, Miles worked alongside Lyria to establish the Human Autonomy Council. They traveled to human enclaves throughout the galaxy, bringing news of Varkonian support and the growing coalition of independent worlds. Everywhere they went, they were met with initial skepticism that quickly transformed into hope as humans realized this was not empty rhetoric, but a genuine opportunity for change. The Union, predictably, attempted to discredit their efforts. Propaganda portrayed Miles as a traitor to humanity, manipulated by alien interests. But such tactics only strengthened the resolve of humans who had long suffered under Union exploitation. Word of the human mechanic who broke an alien princess's chains spread from world to world, becoming a symbol of resistance. 1 year after his impulsive decision to free Lyria from the Talgera, Miles stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city of Varkon. The first official summit of the Coalition of Independent Worlds was about to begin, with representatives from 27 species, including a delegation of humans from 12 different worlds. "Nervous?" Lyria asked, joining him at the balcony. "Terrified," Miles admitted with a smile. "Public speaking was never covered in my mechanic training." Lyria's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. Over the past year, their partnership had evolved into something deeper, a connection that transcended their different species and backgrounds. The princess and the mechanic, united by shared purpose and growing affection. "You don't need to be eloquent," she assured him. "Just be honest. Tell them your story, our story. How one human with a tool belt and determination helped change the course of galactic history." Miles squeezed her hand gently. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" "Not at all," Lyria replied. "The Oracle's vision is already coming to pass. The Union's grip is weakening. More worlds join our coalition each month, and humanity is rediscovering its voice and its strength." Miles looked out over the crystal spires of the Varkonian capital, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. From a lonely mechanic in a converted storage closet to a key figure in a galactic movement for freedom and independence. All because he had refused to walk away when he saw someone in chains. "It's time," Lyria said softly as chimes rang throughout the palace, announcing the summit's commencement. Together, they walked toward the great hall where representatives from across the galaxy awaited. Before entering, Miles paused, turning to Lyria. "Thank you," he said simply. Her 4 silver eyes regarded him with curiosity. For what? For believing I could be more than what the Union defined me as. For seeing potential where others saw just another human mechanic. Lyria smiled, the expression lighting her lavender features. You freed me from my chains, Miles Harper. I merely helped you recognize you could free yourself from yours as well. With that, they entered the hall side by side. The princess and the mechanic who had discovered that sometimes the strongest bonds aren't forged from unbreakable materials, but from trust, courage, and the simple decision to stand against injustice, regardless of the odds. The Union's days of unchallenged dominance were numbered. A new era was dawning, sparked by a human who had torn through supposedly unbreakable chains like paper, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't advanced technology or psychic abilities, but the simple determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.